America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. I come to you live every Monday and Thursday. Monday, I do a relationship show. Thursday, I do a more politics show. The Monday show's more about how to keep you from not screwing up your family and, date with an eye towards family, but mostly how to keep you from not screwing up your family because the market wants you to do that. Excuse me. The market wants you to do that, and I want you to not do that. So today we're going to talk about how to not screw up your children, which is important because if you don't screw up your children, that'll make family life a lot easier. And if you don't take your children seriously, that will end in therapy and drugs and a whole lot of business that you don't want any part of. So what I think, these are all my opinions, but I have 3 dope kids, and this is one part of the game I'm doing actually very well, is that you should just listen to me for the next 10 minutes, do exactly what I say, and I think your kids will end up in some ways better than they would have had you try to do it by nature or on your own. First things first, preschool. Go ahead, teach them how to read. I think the time that's appropriate to do that is, I'd say preschool, the winter break, start this 100 lessons during the winter break. And mind you, I've researched a lot of this, and so, there are other ways, but I think this is a way that works, and not just for me. I think it could work for you. And this is the book, Siegfried Engelmann, Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. I think you should start it in PreK, preschool, during the, or before, but, I think earlier is better, especially since that means you're not in a rush to do anything. And then once they get to school, everything's easier if they already know how to read. Everything's, that's just, you want to make school a confident environment for them. So yeah, PreK, the winter break, while they're in PreK, go ahead and start them on this. And that way they'll be reading by the summer before they start kindergarten, which I think is appropriate. Right? So this is a phonetic approach. Some people will try to tell your kids to read through sight words. I think that is hokum and an actual civil rights violation insofar as it's teaching kids how to guess. It's teaching kids reading is guessing. This teaches phonetics. They'll be able to sound out words. That means they'll be able to sound out words in other languages, and they know that reading takes actual attention and sounding out and not guessing. And that's a good skill for life because I think it's functionally child abuse to teach kids that the sight word approach. It's cooked up by some white women about 20 years ago, and it's lazy. It's horrible. It's horrible. So teach them phonetics. It'll be good for their English reading, and also when they go to other, if they learn other languages, that'll help them do that. So I can't recommend this book enough. It's simple. It does the job. It's just a system that works, and it is about 20 minutes every day. So 100 days, 20 minutes every day, and then your kid can read. It's not more complicated than it appears. And you just do the work, and then it's done. And your kid's ahead of the curve and confident. In those social settings, you want them to already be able to know how to read because everything's easier when you can already read. Everything else you learn, it just gets less mysterious. And don't listen to those people who are trying to push sight words on your kids. That's not how you go about life. While math education has gotten better than in the last 40, 50 years, mostly because I'll do a show on math education probably next week, mostly because we've adopted the approach of some no BS Asian countries, especially Singapore, about these issues. So math education has actually gotten better. Reading education is in the trash. And so just don't listen to anybody who tells you that your kids shouldn't learn how to read phonetically, and it's okay if they just kind of sight read and guess words and do by context clues and divining and a Ouija board on what a word is. That's just not setting your kids up to win. And I want to set your kids up to win. So they should learn how to read phonetically. Now that we have that settled, let us go to, once they're done with that 100 lessons, they can go ahead and work on the Magic Treehouse. Now, the Magic Treehouse books are great because they're good for independent readers, and it builds, there are like 30 of them. They're about this long, 61 pages, 60 pages. They can read them independently. They could take them where they are, and there are like 40 of them so that they can just kind of keep going. And each one of them has like a quality of either natural scientific or historical competence. So they'll get used to figures. And because it's about this the brother and sister who go in time and solve problems. And so they get used to figures that they'll see in history and build a kind of cultural competence. And I trust them because in general, you want your kids to read books about kids not doing kids things, because we don't let kids do interesting things. So if they read books about kids doing kids things, the kids will end up being vain and shallow and small because we don't let kids do important things. You want them to read books about kids solving bigger problems than we let kids solve, because that way they understand that their work is towards solving bigger problems than we let kids solve. Right? So the goal of something like the Magic Treehouse is just to slowly build, not slowly, actually rather quickly, build their vocabulary and working vocabulary and confidence in reading whole books on their own. Some people say, and I think they're wrong, well, you know, as long as the kid's reading, it doesn't matter what they read. That is some garbage. You remember, I'm running a no screens household, so these stories are a large part of how they come to interpret the world. That and the spiritual education that I kind of deliver onto them, but these stories are how they independently come to understand the world. So you want them to be good stories about kids who are not vain and petty and who actually solve real problems. All right, so good news is there's like I said, 30 of these. If for some reason these are a little bit too hokey for your children, for your 4, 5, 6-year-old, there's a Dragon Master series, which is similar scope, except since like there are dragons involved, it's going to be a little bit more punchy in some ways and a little bit more exciting. I think there's a way in which you get less of the historical import, which is why I always push the Magic Treehouse series, the historical and cultural payoff. But when they're done with the Dragon Masters, that's got like 25 books in it, or the Magic Treehouse books, it's 30, and then there's a second series of books about the Magic Treehouse called the Merlin Missions. They're a little bit thicker, the vocabulary is a little bit richer, and by the time they're done with like 20 of these little Magic Treehouse books, and then another 25 of these Merlin Mission books, they're going to be independent readers. If they get bored with those, there is the Little Legend series. These are only 6 books, but once again, they're chapter books, and it's cultural competence and little people solving problems in literary form, which is what you want. And then those are the books they can read on their own after they finish the 100 lessons. These are books they can read on their own after they finish the 100 lessons. Now, what you read to them should have a little bit more punch. And speaking of punch, what you can read to them is something like Tristan Strong punches a hole in the sky. The dialogue, it's a real book. It's a lot more of a book, and so it's a little bit more intimidating. But it's black characters engaging in the world in kind of a meaningful way. I think the right age for this might be 6 and up, maybe 5. Maybe 5 is appropriate as long as you're reading it with them, because the issues are going to be kind of complex. You're talking about race and time, and unless you want to do a lot of explaining, which is good because I do a lot of explaining with my kids when I read with them, then I think 6 and up. And then you could just go through and kind of explain the allusions as your child reads them. So once again, this book is called Tristan Strong, Punches a Hole in the Sky. This could be a read to book for them. You want the read to books to be a little bit more advanced than the something like the Magic Treehouse books, because you want actually them exposed to more sophisticated plot lines and vocabulary. Now, another good read to book is this Nicholas St. North series, The Guardians. It's kind of like the origin of Santa Claus, the origin of Tooth Fairy, the origin of the Sandman, the origin of Jack Frost, except a little bit edgier and interesting, right? So this is before they became the people we know, the origin of the Easter Bunny. And it's well put together, well pitched. And you could start this when they're 4 and read with them, and that is perfectly fine. And it'll increase their vocabulary. It's not, they might want to take it on their own, like when you're not reading to them in bed. But this is great because it's actually not particularly boring for you, and it's good for them. Like I said, read to books should be slightly more sophisticated. All right. So after they've done with the Magic Treehouse books and the Merlin missions, and they can read those small chapter books. They're also Renly books. I don't find them particularly punchy, but once they're done with the Magic Treehouse books or Dragon Masters, and they're ready to read thicker books, just go ahead and give them Percy Jackson. Just go ahead and give them Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson, The Lightning Thief is the name of the first book by a guy named Richard Riordan. Rick Riordan. Yeah, Rick Riordan. And just go ahead and give it to them. They'll be able to, even this is at 6, they'll be able to both follow along in the action and learn how to read while they're reading it. Like I did a lot of this with the Wizard of Oz books. It turns out that there are like 20 of them. Those pretty much taught me how to read because that's just what I read when I was, I think, kindergarten or first grade. And so by the time I was done with, I think, book 10 of them, I just kind of knew how to read. But go ahead and give them the Percy Jackson books. It's fine. If you want to dangle a carrot for them, there is a movie version. I don't think they need it. Apparently Disney came out with now a long series version, but it's just the perfect first independent real book. And they're long, but they're not particularly hard, and they're fast paced, so you can start reading it with them, but pretty soon they'll be able to take it on their own, and which is what you want, right? Because remember, we're running a no screens household, so you're going to have books. You're going to be spending a lot of money on books. You can try to do this with the library, but I think that gets dicey. You're going to be spending money on books. Build up a library, especially if you have kids. They'll just hand it down. Now, I don't have my kids. I have 3 sets of kids. I have a rule that they cannot be reading the same series at the same time because some pressure other kids to go faster than others, and that's unacceptable. I don't like to be a side of pressure. So once they're done with the Percy Jackson books, and there are a lot of Percy Jackson books, so maybe they read 1 or 2 and then kind of need to take a break, or they read the first series but they don't want to go on to the next series because they have like 4 different series of Riordan books set in the same world. You can switch gears and go to Chris Colfer's Land of Stories. So Chris Colfer is the skinny kid from Glee all that year. It turns out when he wasn't writing, his first love was writing children's books. And these books are good. The vocab, once again, at this level, this is kindergarten, first grade, you want them to be stretching their vocabulary. You can start reading this to them, but then once again, pretty soon you want them to be able to read it on their own, and they're really thick books. So your kindergarten, first grade is going to be walking around with a 400-page book, which is appropriate because once again, this is a no screens household, and it is what it is. And you want series of books that way they can just kind of that it pays for them to get invested. Once again, you want books of kids being thrust into situations where they have to solve real problems. Or like real problems in a magical world, whatever, where they actually have to take on responsibility for what they do and they're held accountable in ways that aren't true in like the gossipy types of books from even like the super fights. So like I'm a fan of something like Encyclopedia Brown. We went through Encyclopedia Brown really well with my kids. That works because then I can help them reason through how Encyclopedia solves a case. Cam Jansen's pretty good, and Cam Jansen's funny because it teaches the virtue of paying attention. And Cam has some pretty awful interpersonal instincts in terms of like getting into trouble. So it's nice that she has a friend who kind of keeps her in check. I think that's her amazing memory is not always conducive to making the right decision. So that's actually a fascinating dynamic between her and her friend. But yeah, in terms of big books they can read on their own, and they should read on their own early, 6, 7, they can take The Land of Stories, and there are like 5 or 6 of them. And Colfer wrote another series called Touch of Magic, or Touch of Sorcery, or Touch of Witches, A Touch of, a series. I think there are 3 of them. One's I think A Touch of Sorcery, A Touch of Magic, and A Touch of Wizardry. Anyway, good books for your kids. So that they can read independently. What you could read with them, probably the most outstanding experience you may have reading with them, and you can, once again, you can start this at 7 or 8, and it could go up for, 12, is The Mysterious Benedict Society. This is a book that you will enjoy along with them as you read it with them. And when I say reading with them, you need to switch off paragraph to paragraph. Switch off paragraph to paragraph. That way you can gauge what they know and how they go about working out words. And The Mysterious Benedict Society. Actually good characters. I think Kate Weatherall from this might be one of my favorite characters in Kids Lit. Maybe one of my favorite characters in literature. She's pretty awesome. All right, and once again, there are 4 or 5 of them. They're all really thick. This is a great way to grow. It'll grow their vocabulary. This isn't quite a read on their own book. Under 8, but it's a fantastic read with them when they're 7 or 8. Because there are a few books that both the adults and the children will enjoy appropriately that are supposedly significant. The Nicholas St. North books, the Guardians books, the adults and the children will enjoy, so read it with them. And The Mysterious Benedict Society. Both will enjoy, so read it with them. Then we have, once you're done with all of those books, and then I've given you series. So go ahead, you're going to end up giving them series. Go ahead and move over to reading with them the Philip Pullman fairy tales from Brothers Grimm. They might want to read. You might start it with them, and then they read it on their own. Elegant prose, sophisticated sentence structure, and once again, parents and children will appreciate it appropriately. And not bad, stamped from the beginning. And you could read this when they're 7 or 8 years old, and you just read it with them. Read it with them, and then you go over kind of it's a brief tour on what it means to be black in America. And you just go over with them, and you supplement like every paragraph. And it's not big. You just read it with them at night, 20 minutes a night. You'll be done in a month or so. And it's really well put together. It's really well put together, stamped from the beginning. I think white kids should read this too. But for you black kids and black parents. Then there is there's a nice series, Anoka. She has magic through her hair. It's better than you think. but some people get really feel some sort of way. They don't think kids should read books unless the lead character happens to be, a black woman dealing with black woman things. But this is actually well put together. It's Anyeka and the Academy of the Sun. There are 2 books that are out. The 3rd one's coming out, I think, next year. And these are books that can read on their own, magical of affirmations of black women politics that's not, of black politics that's not ridiculous. And that is not superficial. So I approve. I approve. All right. Future Hero. This is a great series, and once again, the kids can read this on their own, probably when they're reading the second series, maybe while they're reading the Magic Treehouse. If they get tired of the Magic Treehouse, they could read this, and I think they can finish it. They can read it on their own. 2 books in this series by Remy Blackwood, Future Hero. This is good for 5 and 6. Maybe 4 if they get through all the books, but 5 and 6 definitely. And you can definitely read it with them at 4. They can probably read it on their own at 5. And there are 2 books in this series. Also, there's the Who Is books. Really well put together, surprisingly so. This is What is Congress, and then What Are the Winter Olympics? This, you want your kids to be culturally literate in a way without putting them in front of the TV. But like when it's time for the Olympics and it's a big season, then like they'll be actually able to understand what's going on in a rather sophisticated way. And so, or after you watch the Olympics with them, you can get them this, and then they'll be completely enraptured because they've gotten the buzz. Now, lastly, and this is something you can introduce right after, once again, once you get those 100 lessons in, the world opens up for them. These value tales books. That's good because they need an ethical education. You don't want them getting their ethical education from commercial media necessarily, because television, because that's just going to try to conform them into a kind of commercial sensibility. But you want to encourage reflection, and these value tales books are actually pretty good. There are, I think, 20 of them, and they all take a historical character and kind of fictionalize their biography in a way that says, well, the value of determination, the story of Helen Keller, the value of compassion, the story of Florence Nightingale. And so, once again, you're building cultural competence while actually building the confidence in reading and their vocabulary. And if you get through that, there's a Story Thief series, which I think is good. I think you'll kind of get a sense for what kind of books you're looking for. The Story Thief series. This one by Riley. He has a few other series. Tail Spinners is a good series by Retkin. But in general, you want series where kids are dealing with problems that are bigger than kid problems. Because if you don't, then kids will kind of fall in love with being a kid, and then they'll just become vain and insipid and horrible to deal with. You want stories of kids dealing with problems that require a more mature sensibility, so that you could see the process, and the process of them maturing is explained, and not reveling in the common tropes of kids. Okay, so I don't really get endorsements, and I'm not going for endorsements, because endorsements are corporations pay me to sell you to them. I don't want to sell you to them, but all of this costs So I think you should go over to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. And that way I don't have to take brand deals and endorsements where I sell my audience to some corporations. I see these black guys hustling gaming and gambling websites, and I just feel like that's not what I want for my people. All right, so thank you for your time. I will see you on Thursday talking about something completely different. Peace.